Elam Hesh was a creature of edges. He lived at the edge of the town of Prosperity, where the last neat house gave way to scrub and rock. He existed on the edge of the community's notice, a quiet man of 28 who had inherited nothing from his father but a stubborn jaw, a set of worn tools, and 3 leather-bound journals. His only other possessions were a sway-backed but powerful horse named Boulder and the small, sturdy cabin his father had built with his own hands. The town of Prosperity was not a place for edges. It was a place of centers. The center of commerce, with its new railroad spur. The center of society, with its freshly painted church. The center of progress, with its proud, straight-laid streets. Elam was an orphan, a solitary figure who spoke little and watched much. The townsfolk saw him as simple, a bit slow, harmless but inconsequential, like a lone fence post on a vast prairie. They did not know about the journals. Each night, by the low light of a tallow candle, Elam read his father's words. The script was tight and precise, the observations meticulous. For 30 years, his father had recorded the rhythms of the land, the depth of the frost line, the thickness of squirrel fur in autumn, the dates the geese flew south. It was not mere record-keeping. It was a language the town had forgotten how to speak. In the spring of 1888, Elam found the passages that made his blood run cold. His father had noted a confluence of signs, a pattern that appeared only once every 4 decades. An unusually wet spring, a summer that arrived with a sudden, searing heat, a peculiar quietness in the insect population. The last time these signs had aligned, his father had written of the winter of frozen stars, a season of such brutal, unrelenting cold that it had broken the spirit of entire settlements further north. Elam closed the journal. He walked outside and looked at the sky. He felt the specific humidity his father had described. He saw the way the new leaves on the aspens curled at the edges. The signs were not coming. They were already here. The town of Prosperity, busy with its own importance, noticed nothing. Elam made a decision. It was not a decision born of panic, but of a calm, inherited certainty. He would not just survive the coming winter. He would prepare for it on a scale that defied imagination. He spent a week making calculations, his father's engineering notes spread across the rough-hewn table. He planned a root cellar, but not just any cellar. This would be a subterranean larder, a fortress against famine, built into the north-facing slope of the hill behind his cabin. It needed to be deep enough to use the Earth's own geothermal heat. It needed a ventilation system so clever it would breathe without freezing. And it needed to be large enough to hold food for 100 people for 3 months. His calculations ended on one staggering number. Among the vast quantities of other stores, he would need to grow, harvest, and properly store 800 pounds of potatoes. On the 1st of May, he walked into town. He did not go to ask for help or for money. He went to offer a warning. It was a duty his father's memory demanded of him. His first stop was the office of Mayor Thompson. The mayor was a man who believed in ledgers and timetables. His world was one of predictable inputs and expected outputs. "A winter like no other?" the mayor repeated, peering over his spectacles. He tapped a neatly printed train schedule on his desk. "Elam, the supply wagon arrives from the capital every Tuesday. Every single Tuesday. Rain, shine, or a bit of snow. We are a modern town. We are connected. We don't need to live like frightened prairie dogs, hoarding nuts and berries." Elam tried to explain the signs, the patterns in the journals, The mayor waved a dismissive hand. Old superstitions, son. Anecdotes. We have the railroad now. We have progress. He left the mayor's office with a profound sense of isolation. The world of timetables and the world of seasons were two different languages, and this town only spoke the first. His second encounter was more public and more humiliating. At the general store, he was speaking to the proprietor about the unusual blight on the early beans when Dr. Finch approached. Dr. Finch was a man of science, or at least of scientific pronouncements. He was young, educated back east, and possessed a supreme confidence in the knowledge he'd acquired from books. "Bury 800 pounds of potatoes," Dr. Finch announced, his voice carrying through the store. Several customers turned to listen. "Mr. Hesh, are you attempting to create a plague? Do you have any concept of anaerobic bacteria?" "Of botulism?" The doctor warmed to his subject, enjoying the rapt audience. "That much decaying organic matter, sealed underground, will create a pit of pestilence, a miasma of rot that could poison the groundwater for a mile around. It is the most profoundly unhygienic and dangerous idea I have ever heard." He pronounced the word unhygienic as if it were a final, damning judgment. The storekeeper chuckled. A few of the women whispered. Elam felt their eyes on him, a mixture of pity and amusement. The final seal on his ostracism was set by Mr. Abernathy, the richest rancher in the county. Abernathy had just spent a fortune on a towering, state-of-the-art grain silo. It was made of corrugated metal, imported from a factory in Chicago, and it gleamed on the horizon like a monument to the future. He found Elam surveying the hill behind his cabin, planning the first cut into the earth. Abernathy rode up on a fine, spirited mare, a stark contrast to Elam's stoic boulder. "Heard you're taking up excavation, Hesh?" Abernathy boomed, a wide grin on his face. He slapped his saddle. "While you're down there playing in the dirt with the worms, I'm putting my faith in modern American engineering." He gestured proudly toward his silo. "That's progress. That's security. Not grubbing in the earth like our grandfathers." The story spread through Prosperity like wildfire. It was too good a tale to keep quiet. The quiet fool on the edge of town, digging a giant hole to bury potatoes that the doctor himself said would rot and create a plague. It became a joke, a town-wide piece of entertainment. The project was christened Hesh's Folly. Soon, a new phrase entered the local dialect. If a man embarked on a pointless or foolish task, his neighbors would say he was digging potatoes to rot. It was a cruel, casual shorthand for futility, and it clung to Elam like the dust from his work. He heard it whispered as he bought supplies. He saw the smirks on the faces of men gathered on the boardwalk. The children, with the thoughtless cruelty of their age, would sometimes chant it as he passed. "Hesh's folly! Hesh's folly! Digging his potatoes to rot!" Elam did not respond. He did not argue or defend himself. He simply retreated to the edge of town, to his work, to the silent company of his horse, and the steadfast wisdom of his father's journals. The mockery was a wall between him and the town, and behind that wall, in silence and solitude, he began to dig. The work began on the 15th of May. The air was sweet with the scent of lilac and damp earth. The town of Prosperity was alive with the easy optimism of spring. Elam and Boulder were a two-being machine. Elam would break the earth with a pickaxe, the sharp crack echoing in the morning stillness. He would shovel the loosened soil and rock into a large sled. Boulder, patient and powerful, would then drag the sled down the hill to be dumped, his hooves finding sure footing on the slope. Day after day, the rhythm was the same. The swing of the pick, the scrape of the shovel, the creak of the sled harness, the soft snort of the horse. The sun beat down on his back. His hands, already calloused, blistered, then bled, then formed new, tougher calluses. His muscles screamed in protest each morning, then settled into a deep, enduring ache. He was not merely digging a hole. He was executing a precise design. His father's journals were explicit. The cellar had to be 12 feet deep, 20 feet wide, and 30 feet long. The entrance had to face due north, shielded by the hill itself from the winter sun, which could cause thawing and rot. He dug through topsoil, rich and black, then through a thick layer of dense, red clay that clung to his shovel and boots. Finally, at 8 feet, he hit shale. It was back-breaking work, prying the layers of flaky rock apart with a long iron bar. The town watched his progress with detached amusement. Men would ride out on a Sunday afternoon as if visiting a public works spectacle to marvel at the size of the hole. They would shake their heads, chuckle, and ride back to town with a fresh story about the deepening of Hesh's folly. Once the excavation was complete, the second phase began. This was the work that separated his plan from a simple hole in the ground. This was the genius of it. From the bed of Miller's Creek, a mile away, he began hauling stones. Not round river rocks, but flat, heavy slabs of granite. Boulder strained in his harness, dragging the stone boat load by load up the hill. Elam would unload each stone, his body pushed to its limit. He lined the entire earthen cavity with these stones. He used no mortar. His father's notes explained that a dry stone wall could shift with the frost heave of the ground, settling back into place, whereas a mortared wall would crack and fail. He fit them together like a vast three-dimensional puzzle, a skill that took him weeks to master. The walls rose, solid and permanent. For the roof, he laid thick timber beams he had felled and seasoned the previous year. Across these, he placed a layer of smaller logs, then a waterproof layer of birch bark sealed with pine pitch. Finally, he shoveled the excavated earth back on top, creating a sod roof 4 feet thick. The most critical part was the ventilation. A cellar without airflow was a tomb of mold. His father had designed a system of 2 shafts. The intake shaft was low to the ground on the north side, designed to draw in the coldest, densest air. The exhaust shaft was on the south side, rising 10 feet before it exited, disguised on the surface as an unassuming pile of rocks. The temperature difference would create a slow, constant, circulating current of air. It would keep the cellar dry and fresh, preventing the buildup of moisture and rot that Dr. Finch had so confidently predicted. While this monumental construction project continued, he also had to tend his fields. That year, the land gave forth its bounty with a strange, almost desperate abundance. It was another sign. His potato plants were thick and green, the ground beneath them swelling with tubers. His corn grew tall, his beans heavy on the vine. By late August, the folly was complete from the outside. It looked like a natural part of the hill, a gentle swell of earth with a single, heavy plank door set into its face. Only the 2 discrete rock piles hinted at the engineering hidden beneath. He spent September harvesting. He worked from before dawn until after dusk, a race against the coming cold. He dug the potatoes, leaving them on the field for a day to cure in the sun. He calculated the yield. It was over 900 pounds. He selected the best 800 pounds for the cellar, setting them aside with a farmer's practiced eye. The preservation was a ritual. He layered the potatoes in wooden bins with dry sand, keeping them from touching. He braided onions and garlic into long ropes. He packed carrots and turnips in barrels of sawdust. He salted fish caught from the creek and hung long strips of venison to dry into jerky. The town saw only the obsessive, seemingly mad labor. They did not see the science. They did not see the wisdom. They saw a fool digging his own strange grave and filling it with food that was doomed to spoil. By October, the work was done. The cellar was full. The air inside was cool and smelled of damp earth, sand, and the faint, sweet scent of potatoes. It was a smell of life, not decay. Elam stood inside, a single lantern casting flickering shadows on the stone walls. He felt the profound quiet of the earth around him. He had honored his father's knowledge. He had done the work. Now all that was left was to wait. The first sign came in the last week of September. The geese. They always flew south in mid-October, their loud, sociable honking filling the autumn air for days. This year, they left a month early. They flew not in their usual leisurely V formations, but in vast, silent, disciplined fleets, high in the stratosphere, moving with a desperate, urgent purpose. Elam watched them go, a knot tightening in his stomach. He opened his father's journal. September 29th, 1848. The geese have fled. They know what is coming. A winter of iron. The second sign was the squirrels. The townspeople thought their frantic activity was charming, a sign of a healthy autumn. Elam saw it for what it was. Panic. They stripped the pine and oak trees bare, their chittering calls sharp and angry. They buried nuts with a frenzy that went beyond instinct. They were preparing for a siege. Then came the beavers on Miller's Creek. Every autumn, they patched their dam with mud and sticks. This year, they were felling entire trees, dragging thick logs to reinforce their lodge, building the walls 2 feet thicker and 3 feet higher than ever before. They were building a fortress. The air itself began to change. By mid-October, the usual hazy, golden light of autumn was gone. The sky was a pale, clear, crystalline blue, and the air had a strange metallic scent to it. At night, there was no dew. The ground was bone dry. Elam checked the journals again. The signs aligned perfectly. His father had seen this only once. It was the prelude to a winter that did not just arrive, but attacked. A part of him, a small, human part, felt the urge to try one last time. To walk into town, to stand in the square and shout his warning at the sky. He imagined the scene. Mayor Thompson adjusting his spectacles and talking about the train schedule. Dr. Finch delivering another lecture on hygiene. Mr. Abernathy laughing, slapping his knee, and pointing to his gleaming, invincible silo. The thought died before it could take root. Their pride was a fortress far more impregnable than his cellar. They would not hear him. A warning they did not want to hear was just noise. His silence was not born of spite, but of a weary, profound resignation. He could not save people who were so certain they did not need saving. He would save himself. And his horse. On the first day of November, he made his final preparations. He brought Boulder into the small, sturdy stable attached to the cabin. It was connected by a short, covered walkway. He stacked the last of the split firewood inside, enough for 4 months of careful burning. He checked the seal on the heavy cellar door, packing the edges with strips of cloth. He stood for a moment and looked out at prosperity. The lights in the houses glowed with warmth and confidence. The town felt safe, wrapped in its blanket of progress and self-assurance. It looked solid, permanent. Elam knew it was an illusion. He went inside, barred the cabin door, and slid the heavy stone that served as the inner lock for his cellar. The world outside was sealed away. The muffled silence of the earth enveloped him. 4 days later, on the 5th of November, 1888, the world broke. It did not begin with a gentle flurry. It began with silence. An unnatural stillness fell over the land around noon. The temperature, which had been a mild 40 degrees, plunged as if it had fallen off a cliff. Within an hour, it was 0. The air grew thin and sharp, smelling of ozone. Then the wind struck. It was not a gale, it was a physical blow from the north, a solid wall of moving air that hit the town of Prosperity with the force of a battering ram. The sound was not a whistle, but a deep, grinding roar, the sound of the world being torn apart. With the wind came the snow. It was not the soft, fluffy snow of pleasant winter days. It was granular, hard as sand, and it flew perfectly horizontal to the ground. It was less like weather and more like an act of celestial abrasion, scouring the very face of the earth. In town, the first reaction was annoyance, then concern. This was no mere squall. By nightfall, the roar of the wind was a constant, terrifying presence. The snow, driven by the relentless gale, found its way through every crack, under every door, around every window frame. Tiny, sifting dunes of white powder began to form inside the houses. The second day, the concern turned to fear. The snow did not stop. The wind did not lessen. The temperature continued to drop. The railroad tracks, Prosperity's lifeline to the outside world, vanished beneath a seamless blanket of white. On the morning of the third day, the telegraph lines, coated in a thick, heavy layer of ice and strained to the breaking point by the wind, began to snap. Their reports echoed through the muffled town like sporadic rifle fire, each one a severing of another tie to the world they knew. Prosperity was alone. The systems of a modern town began to fail, one by one. Mr. Abernathy's magnificent silo, the symbol of progress, became his undoing. The extreme cold, far beyond what the Chicago engineers had planned for, caused the thin metal sheets to contract. Seams buckled, rivets popped with sharp cracks. Worse, the warmth and moisture from the thousands of bushels of grain inside condensed on the super-chilled metal walls, forming a thick, suffocating layer of ice. The grain in contact with the ice began to steam, then mold, then rot. The stench of decay, frozen and acrid, began to seep from the proud, broken structure. Modern progress had failed. Dr. Finch's handsome new house, with its large, fashionable plate glass windows, became a trap. The immense, unceasing pressure of the wind found a harmonic frequency in the large panes. One by one, they did not just crack. They exploded inward, showering his well-appointed parlor with razor-sharp shards of glass and a tidal wave of blinding, suffocating snow. Textbook knowledge had failed. Mayor Thompson's confidence was the next casualty. The town's communal woodpile, his guarantee of warmth and order, was located in the center of the town square. By the fourth day, it was buried beneath a 20-foot snowdrift, packed by the wind into a mass as dense and hard as sandstone. The town had fuel, but it was as inaccessible as if it were on the moon. Civic planning had failed. While the town descended into a maelstrom of freezing, howling chaos, the world inside Elam Hesh's cabin was one of profound and insulated peace. The roar of the storm was a distant, muted hum, the sound of a faraway ocean. The thick, sod roof and the mass of the hill itself absorbed the wind's fury. The temperature inside the cabin, heated by a small, efficient wood stove burning just a few logs a day, remained a steady 55 degrees. The attached stable was warmer still, Boulder's body heat contributing to the cozy security. Elam spent his days in a quiet routine. He would tend to his horse, read his father's journals, and eat his simple, nourishing meals. He slept soundly, unafraid. He was not surviving the storm. He was simply living, while the world outside ceased to do so. The folly was not a grave. It was an ark. The storm raged for 6 days. When it finally stopped, it was replaced by a silence more terrifying than the wind, and a cold that was a living, predatory thing. The sky was a brilliant, merciless blue. The sun was a white, heatless disk. The snow lay 20 feet deep in the flat places and in drifts that buried entire houses. Prosperity was a town entombed. For 3 weeks, the silence and the cold held dominion. The survivors huddled in their homes, their food supplies dwindling, their hope eroding with each passing day. The supply train had not arrived. The supply train was not coming. The first to break was the man of science. Dr. Finch had watched his own children grow pale and listless. His wife's eyes were wide with a terror his medical books had never taught him how to treat. Their larder was empty. They were burning their furniture to keep from freezing. His pride had been consumed by a more powerful, primal force, a father's fear. He bundled himself in what rags he had left and began the journey. It took him 2 hours to flounder through the snowdrifts to the edge of town, to the place where Hesh's folly should be. All he could see was a smooth, windswept hillock of snow, with a single stovepipe flue sticking out of it like a strange metal reed. With a hand that was numb with cold and shame, Dr. Finch knocked on the warm metal of the stovepipe. The tinny, desperate sound was pathetic in the vast silence. Inside, Elam heard the faint tapping. He knew who it would be. He had been waiting. He unbarred his door and began to dig his way out through the exit tunnel he had planned for, a narrow passage that emerged 50 feet down the slope. The snow was light and dry. It took him only a few minutes. He emerged into the blinding white world and saw the doctor standing there. The man was a ghost of his former self. His fine coat was gone, his face gaunt and stubbled, his eyes hollowed out. He could not meet Elam's gaze. He stared at the snow-covered ground between them. "Hesh," the doctor rasped, his voice cracking. "Elam, my children, they have not eaten in 2 days." He finally looked up, his eyes swimming with tears of desperation. "I was wrong. I was a fool. You were right." Elam looked at the broken man. He felt no triumph. He felt no satisfaction. He felt only a deep, somber sense of the inevitable. He gave a single, quiet nod. "Bring them," he said. The doctor's family was the first. They stumbled into the warmth and dim light of the cabin, their eyes wide with disbelief. Elam led them into the cellar. The sight that met them was one of impossible abundance. The neat stacks of potato bins, the long, dark shapes of cured venison, the ropes of onions. The air smelled of earth and life. Elam gave them food, hot potato soup and hard, salty jerky. They ate like starving animals, their hands shaking. Word spread through the entombed town with the speed of a miracle. One by one, then family by family, they made the desperate pilgrimage to Hesh's folly. The storekeeper who had chuckled at him, the women who had whispered, the men who had ridden out on Sundays to laugh. They came, their pride scoured away by hunger and cold. Elam welcomed them all. He said nothing of their mockery. He made no demands for apology. He simply gave them refuge. He became their silent leader. He organized the cellar, rationing the food with a firm but fair hand. He established routines. His quiet competence was an anchor in their sea of chaos. They had called him a fool, and now they hung on his every word, their survival utterly dependent on the foresight they had ridiculed. The last to arrive were Mayor Thompson and Mr. Abernathy. They came together, supporting each other through the deep snow. Abernathy's hands were black with frostbite, wrapped in rags, a testament to his futile attempts to break into his own frozen, rotten wealth. The mayor, who had placed his faith in timetables, looked ancient, his authority stripped away, leaving only a tired, frightened old man. They stepped into the cellar and stopped dead. They saw the community they were supposed to lead, huddled but safe. They saw the impossible stores of food. They saw the proof of their own blindness, made manifest in stone and earth and perfectly preserved potatoes. Mr. Abernathy, the proud rancher, began to weep. Quietly, wretchedly. The folly had become the refuge. The outcast had become the savior. The great thaw began in late March. It was slow, then sudden. The world wept, the snow turning to slush and then to torrents of muddy water. As the land re-emerged, the true scale of the devastation was revealed. Ruined homes, dead livestock, a town broken and humbled. But it was not defeated. It had survived. Every single person had survived. Because of Elam Hesh. As soon as the town square was a sea of mud instead of a mountain of snow, Mayor Thompson called a town meeting. The entire population gathered, their faces thin and sobered by their ordeal. They stood before the town hall, its paint peeled and its windows boarded over. Elam stood at the back of the crowd, quiet and unassuming as always. He had no desire to be here, but he knew it was necessary. Mayor Thompson climbed the steps. He was not the same man who had tapped his train schedule with such confidence. He looked at the faces of his people. Then he looked for Elam in the crowd. Their eyes met. "We were fools," the mayor began, his voice clear and steady in the cold air. "Blinded by our comfort and deafened by our pride. We believed in timetables and machines, and we forgot the wisdom of the earth." He paused, taking a deep breath. "A man in this community tried to warn us. He possessed a wisdom we had lost, and we called it madness. He tried to save us, and we repaid him with mockery. His name is Elam Hesh. I was wrong. The town of prosperity was wrong. And he was right." He stepped back, and Dr. Finch stepped forward. "I am a man of science," the doctor said, his voice heavy with humility. "And I am here to tell you that my science was incomplete. I read books, but Elam Hesh read the world. His cellar, his folly, was a masterpiece of engineering. The geothermal stability, the brilliant passive ventilation, it was not luck, and it was not primitive. It was genius. My textbook knowledge was arrogant and inferior to his practical truth." Finally, Mr. Abernathy, his bandaged hands held before him, climbed the steps. He did not speak for a long moment. He simply pointed one bandaged hand toward the horizon, at the twisted, rusting ruin of his great silo. "That," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "is what pride builds. A hollow, empty monument to itself that fails when you need it most. Then he turned and pointed directly at Elam's small cabin, nestled against the hill. "And that," he said, "is survival. That is wisdom." The crowd turned as one, their faces filled with a gratitude so profound it was painful to behold. They called for Elam to speak. Reluctantly, he made his way to the front. He stood on the steps, uncomfortable in the spotlight, and looked at the town that had scorned him, and now revered him. He spoke only a few words. His voice was quiet, yet it carried across the square. "My father taught me to watch and to listen. The earth provides if you respect it. Pride is a poor substitute for a full belly. Let this be the only lesson." He stepped down, and the meeting was over. The transformation of prosperity did not happen overnight, but it was absolute. They rebuilt their town, but they rebuilt it differently. The lessons of the winter of frozen stars were seared into their collective soul. Every new house that was constructed was built not just with a foundation, but with a deep, stone-lined root cellar, designed according to the principles in Elam's father's journals. The town established a communal larder, managed with meticulous care. They learned to read the seasons again. The phrase that had once been a slur was reborn. Digging potatoes to rot was never said again. Instead, if a man showed uncommon foresight, if he prepared diligently when others were complacent, people would nod in approval and say he was digging a hesh. It became the highest compliment, a term for wisdom, prudence, and quiet strength. Elam Hesh never fully rejoined the community. He did not marry. He did not take a seat on the town council. He remained a man of the edges, living in his small cabin with his horse. But he was no longer an outcast. He was a sage, a teacher. People came to him not with gossip, but with questions. Farmers asked his advice on planting. The mayor consulted him on the town's water supply. He taught the children how to read the clouds, how to understand the language of the squirrels and the geese. He lived this way for another 40 years, a quiet, respected fixture, as permanent and reliable as the hill behind his home. He died peacefully in his sleep one autumn night, at the age of 68. The entire town, and the children of the children he had saved, mourned his passing. They did not bury him in the town cemetery. They laid him to rest on the top of the hill, overlooking the cellar that was his legacy. And on the old, heavy stone door of that cellar, they affixed a simple bronze plug. It did not list dates or accomplishments. It said only this: Elam Hesh. He listened to the earth when we would not. He was right.